Who, the snitch that ratted us out? Oh, absolutely.
Who was it?
You don't know?
If I knew, they'd be dead already.
Before season 3, they tease revenge, money, family, death, betrayal, love, and also power. And now that we've seen episode 1, we know exactly what they mean and where everybody sits at this moment in time in terms of all those particular themes. You've got characters like King Kilo looking for revenge, the same with Claudia Flynn, who against all odds did survive. You've got the family dynamic between the Garcias, and I'm sure the Egans will follow suit in episode 2. Betrayal. Shanti will always be on the list, but I do think you can also now add Diamond, who gave the go-ahead to go and get rid of D-Mac. And of course, the usual death. It wouldn't be a Power season opener without Tommy cancelling someone's Christmas. But we are going to dive deep into all of it, unpacking all the conversations, clues, Easter eggs, along with a theory or two for all things Power Book 4 Force, episode 301, Do or Die. Now, episode 1 kicks straight off from where season 2 episode 10 left off. Tommy received a call from Miguel where he said Tommy would never see Maria again, and also where Bones and Raheem were keeping Vic Flynn in the warehouse. He comes out of the bar fuming and gets a text from Bones telling him that Vic Flynn just took a call and he wants out. Diamond then follows Tommy outside and he tells Diamond law enforcement know about Vic and they're probably also on the way to the warehouse. Now Diamond was confused because Tommy was behaving quite weird, and that's because of Maria, but he didn't tell Diamond because he's been seeing Maria behind his back as well, and I don't think Diamond appreciated the way Tommy told him what to do. What Tommy and Diamond have is a partnership. But lately, when you also include season 2, everything that Tommy's been doing, he's been making a lot of moves and calls without Diamond. Now with Maria, Miguel had her posted up at his place. She was alive and well, as I think we all expected. But Miguel was pissed with Maria because she decided to choose Tommy over him. He was pissed because he thought Maria sold his own brother out so Tommy could get in the good books with Shay. He mentioned that he didn't want Maria anywhere near Tommy Egan. She was never going to see him again, and if it meant keeping Maria here, so be it. But the reason why Maria actually loves Tommy more than any of her previous love interests is because Tommy ain't like any of the other guys that she's dated before. He's probably the only one that's ever stood up to Miguel, and also the only one who's probably not scared of Miguel. Tommy isn't Kendall from season 2 who Miguel can kind of just bully. If Miguel tried to ambush Tommy in his apartment, you can be damn sure he won't go down without a fight, and he wouldn't go down without taking some, if not all of Miguel's men with him. That's one of the many reasons why Maria's fallen in love with Tommy. Now this is where the conversation turned a little feisty. She pulled Miguel's own gun on him and then herself, but Maria then revealed something that we never knew before. She mentions that if he doesn't let her be with Tommy, then she's going to tell Shay that Miguel was the one who killed his son, Alejandro. He killed Shay's son so he could be the leader of the Insane Princes. Now that's a bit of information that we didn't know before. Finally, we're getting some history on Miguel Garcia, Shay, and the Insane Princes, and it is a huge secret. A secret that I do think will probably stay safe with Maria. I don't think Maria would ever want anything to happen to Miguel, as we learned a bit later on when she made Tommy the promise that he won't kill Miguel. But you do have to wonder why they've dropped that bit of information if they're not going to intend to use it a bit later on. So definitely something to keep in the back of our minds. Depending on how this relationship pans out between Miguel, Tommy and Maria, depending on what happens in the streets, will that bit of information find its way to Shay? Now with Vic, we already know he was posted up at the warehouse with Bones and Raheem. But knowing that law enforcement were right around the corner, Diamond came to tell them that there was a snitch in the mix, and they also needed to get him out of there before law enforcement came in, because Stacey Marks would have definitely traced that call that Vic made at the end of season 2. That's exactly what happened a bit later on. Stacey Marks and her team closed in on the warehouse where the CBI were holding Vic. Unfortunately, she was way too late. There was no sign of Vic, the CBI, or anyone, apart from his phone, and that's when she thought they were too late. In her mind, she thought Vic was as good as dead, because he'd been rumbled, and that was also on Stacey Marks. She failed to protect her CI and took it too far, just like Angela did with Nomar back in Power. He ended up dead, and that's what Stacey Marks thought happened to Vic. Now, catching up with Janard and Shanti, they were talking about the plan they put into motion right at the back end of season 2. For those who may have forgotten, Janard was the one who caught Maria coming out of Tommy's apartment and shared this with Shanti. They sat on the information for a while until they felt it was right to make the move and give the information to Miguel. That's what they did in episode 10. Their plan was to use Miguel to do their dirty work for them. I mean, it actually was a very clever strategy from Shanti. It wasn't the first time she's come up with something very clever, and it's not going to be the last time we're going to hear plans from her either. She was also making plans for D-Mac a bit later on, but Shanti was getting the feeling something wasn't quite right. They should have already got the call that Tommy was taken off the map. Janard mentioned it was probably because Miguel was torturing him and making him suffer. They've seen him do it before, and that's what they thought. However, they couldn't be further from the truth. Tommy's not someone who hides or runs. He's always been someone that confronts problems and issues in the streets face to face, head on. So he came over to confront Miguel, and after a back and forth with some of his soldiers and a back and forth with Miguel, he does actually mention to Tommy that he just let Maria go, and he's only going to keep the peace and allow him to continue dealing in the streets because of the peace deal that they made under Shay. But if he does hurt Maria, he'll skin him alive. Now we know that's only half the truth. Yeah, I mean, they did make a peace deal with Shay at the end of season 2. Shay did make sure they both shook hands and warned them to play ball, but that's only half of the reason in terms of why he let Maria go. The truth is, she threatened to expose his dirty little secret to Shay that he killed his son Alejandro. Again, I really do wonder if it's something that comes out a bit later on, if it's something that Tommy finds out from Maria, because information of that sort, now that's power, that's leverage, that's information you can use to own someone, just like Tommy now owns Vic. If Tommy ever found out Miguel killed Shay's son to take over the Insane Princes, I mean, that's game over. On the flip side, would Maria really kind of want anything happen to Miguel either? So would she really spill that secret? Either way, she found herself in a very difficult spot. Miguel may be a lot of things, but at the end of the day, he's still her brother, and blood is thicker than water. That is one of the themes that Gary Lennon has teased before the season began, so Maria did want Tommy to promise her that he wouldn't hurt Miguel, and that she didn't want to see him until he could make that promise. There wouldn't be no Tommy and Maria if that were to happen. Now before episode 1 in the synopsis, it did tease that Tommy did take a couple of big players off the map, and one of them was Markovic, the leader of the Serbs. Shen, who was the leader for the Ortegas who run the Marquez cartel, he said that he's still got the backing of the Ortegas and they can handle his extradition. Once he's in transit, then they can do their thing. He also slipped him a note at the same time, and we didn't need to wait long to find out exactly what it was. It was a message that said goodbye, along with some poison that actually killed Markovic. So now Markovic is off the map, although I do want to raise one little point.
You can kill me, but it is of no consequence because I am not Lobos and my organization does not die with me.
Back in Power, Milan mentioned that you could kill him, but it would be of no consequence because his organization wouldn't die with him. After that, we then saw Jason Mičić, Tatiana returning for season 1, and then there was Markovic. The Serbs do run very deep, and we don't know whether a new leader will take Markovic's position and whether the Serbs would be reintroduced into the storyline later on, or maybe even in a arc in Power Legacy, something to definitely keep in mind, or maybe not. But let's stick with the investigation around Markovic, law enforcement, and their RICO case that they've been building throughout season 2. At this moment in time, Stacey Marks was still hell-bent on catching Tommy Egan, but her team behind her, they weren't aware that Markovic was dead and that Claudia had been stabbed. Regardless, they believe that their priority should have now been the conviction for the players that they did manage to catch. That was Roberto Ortega, Markovic, and Claudia Flynn. And they were right. She caught some big players, but we all know how obsessed law enforcement are with characters such as the St. Patrick's and Tommy Egan. Now the meeting was interrupted because Donna Jackson from the DNC was here to pay her a visit. The DNC were really happy that Stacey Marks managed to deliver the Marquez cartel. She said forget about Tommy Egan, she's just delivered a Mexican cartel, and that was huge. The public didn't need to know about one of their losses, which was one of Bobby DeFranco's men. That's something he was still pissed about a bit later on, and why he said he was quitting the task force. The fact that he lost one of his guys in the bust at the end of season 2, that just didn't sit well with him, especially when Stacey Marks was behaving as if she didn't even care. Now this is something that has been teased to cause some tension between the two. I do think it is going to make their relationship quite rocky to say the least, so just something to keep in mind going forward. But in terms of the DNC and Donna Jackson's role, they'd been discussing internal candidates, and Stacey Marks had the full backing of the Democratic Party to potentially replace the current mayor. There was going to be a scandal involving Mayor Bradley that was going to break anytime soon, and they wanted Stacey Marks to run for mayor. Now we know Stacey Marks is really ambitious. Running for mayor is something that she's always wanted, and that's why she later changed her tune with her team. She said forget about Tommy Egan. The main focus was to get convictions for Roberto Ortega of the Mexican cartel, Markovic, the leader of the Serbian network, and Claudia Flynn. But throughout those last few scenes, she was ducking quite a few calls. She was called 3 times until Detective Sen got the news that Markovic was dead, and they also hit Claudia Flynn. If they didn't have Ortega, Markovic, or Claudia, they have no case. And so she asked a question that all of us have been asking for a very long time. Did Claudia Flynn survive? Now we know Claudia was stabbed at the end of season 2, but we know how the script works for Power, at least when it comes to things like this. The blueprint was Felipe Lobos, Lauren from Book 2 Ghost, Unique from Raising Kanan, and there are a few other examples, and that's why there was always a little doubt in my mind. Lo and behold, Claudia Flynn was alive. Now Stacey Marks was here to see if she'd cooperate and help convict the Marquez cartel, because at the end of the day, Claudia Flynn is actually small fish, so is Markovic. but convicting a main member of the Mexican cartel along with the drug bust, that's considered a big win. But Claudia point blank refused, because I think even Claudia Flynn knows that snitching on Markovich and snitching on the Mexican cartel, that's a huge difference. Snitching is still snitching, but she knows it's a big death wish if she snitched on the Marquez cartel. She then had another visit a bit later on, Shen, who was Ortega's lawyer. Now it was hard for them to actually get to Claudia compared to Markovich, but Claudia did convince him to at least go check out the information that it was actually Tommy and Shanti who set this up. He then went and did just that. Her story checked out and she would continue to be in business with the Marquez cartel. But Tommy and Shanti, they'd be dead by this evening. Now let's move on from one rat Flynn over to another. With Vic, we picked up with him at Diamond's barbershop, but they weren't going to confront Vic about him being the snitch just yet. They still wanted him to feel like they had his trust. They told him that they gave the address to only a select few, and it was Shanti who was the one who flipped between Tommy and Claudia. So for now, they let him go, because Tommy's got a bigger plan. And that's what Gary Lennon and Joseph Sikora were teasing before season 3. They mentioned there's a lot of ways for Vic to avoid what seems to be his destiny, and what Tommy has planned for him would be a great reveal. The word about Markovich also started to filter through that he was dead. Christmas came early because Tommy saw this as a huge opportunity. He wanted to know everybody who Markovich and the Serbs were supplying so they could swoop in. As we know in Chicago, it's all about territory. The more territory you have, the more money, power, muscle, and the quicker you can then get rid of the insane princes and Miguel Garcia. You have a look at the map of Chicago, Vic has now taken over the territory from Walter Flynn, but that territory is also now in partnership with the CBI. But you then have a look at the Serbian territory, that was all up for grabs. Crews such as the Albanians and the Italians that we're going to come to in just a moment, they were all up for grabs. But just in terms of Vic, he came back to Stacey Marks to tell her that Tommy thinks the snitch is someone else. Someone else called Shanti Showstopper who runs Garfield Park, which didn't make sense to Stacey Marks. She said it doesn't make sense because they didn't have anything to do with Shanti. She's never been on their radar and maybe Tommy was playing him. But the way Tommy and Diamond put it to Vic earlier on convinced him because Shanti was technically playing both sides. That wasn't a secret. Tommy didn't lie when he told Vic about Shanti. He hid the secret about them knowing Vic was a snitch, but he did so by covering it with another truth about something else, which was Shanti. And that's how you gain someone's trust, by telling them just enough truth, but not everything. Something that Tommy is going to be teaching D-Mac a bit later on. Now Vic's thinking this is his chance to get out clean, but now that Stacey Marks is actually thinking, put Vic to use to get Claudia away for good. And also because she's probably going to think about having another stab at Tommy Egan down the line. She definitely keeps on moving the goalposts, and I have no doubt she's probably going to continue in season 3. Now if I were Vic, I would have probably just vanished. Stacey Marks thought he was dead, Tommy and Diamond let him walk out of the warehouse and also the barbershop. I would have taken the money, done the pickups, taken that money as well, and just disappeared for good, which was actually his plan. But before he planned to leave, he did come and visit Uncle Paulie's wife, Beth, who we have heard about before.
20 years ago, when you rolled up on Paulie and his wife.
Beth catches a face full of fucking glass, 52 fucking stitches to put her beautiful face back together.
52 stitches. Even though it was 20 years ago, I would have maybe liked to have seen maybe a scar or two on Beth's face, just to match the history and what Uncle Paulie said back in season 1. But anyway, the reason why Vic was here was because he was running. But he wasn't going to run without leaving something behind, just in case. He left Beth with an envelope that has enough to put everyone away. So this envelope right here, which is very similar to the flash drive storyline from Book 2 Ghost, and also the recording of Tommy killing Ruiz that lingered around in power for a very long time. I do have a feeling that we're probably going to be revisiting this envelope storyline at some point later on in this season. Whatever's on here could put Tommy in danger, and it really is deja vu. Tommy definitely has been here before. Now with Tommy and Diamond, after they heard about Markovich, they came to see Peter, who was the leader of the Albanians. The problem was, they did get the memo that Markovich got popped, and they'd already put a deal in place with Miguel Garcia and the Insane Princes. They did try and undercut Miguel Garcia, but that's not how Peter does business, so it was kindly refused, which probably was the right thing to do in that scenario. For Tommy and Diamond, they realized that they're going to have to play the long game, continue building, continue with their coalition, take what they can from the Serbian territory, and then come back and undercut Miguel's entire customer base later on, when they're in a much stronger position. For now, it was time to lock in the Italians. Now on the Italians, we didn't exactly see them in episode 1, but you guys know this has been a very big focus of mine over the past few years. I've been a strong believer of the Italians returning, specifically the storyline around Elisa Marie. I do think the Italians have a huge part to play, not just in Tommy's future, but also Tariq's. The involvement in Proctor's death, the conversation between Tommy and Elisa Marie, this is something that just may be a little bit of a hint and a foreshadow for what's to come. So definitely something to keep in mind and something we will unpack in this coming week. Now with Miguel, he also got word that Tommy did try and make a move with the Albanians, but now he's planning to do everything low-key. Maybe that's how he got rid of Alejandro, Shay's son, using another enemy to take him out for him, because that's what he wants to do here, have one of Egan's enemies take him off the map for him, leaving his hands clean. Now who that enemy is, it could genuinely be anyone. We know Tommy's always got a long list of enemies, but could it be Janard and Shanti, or could it be someone else? So speaking of Janard and Shanti, she was actually here saying they needed to make a play starting with Diamond at the barbershop, make it maybe look like a robbery, take them off the map and then take over the CBI, just like they planned to do in season 2. But Tommy was lurking around the corner, and I'm sure he's not stupid. Even if he didn't arrive in time to hear what Shanti was planning, Tommy knows these two can't be trusted. For Janard and Shanti, they couldn't believe that Tommy just walked into the gym, because they thought he'd be dead because of what they put into motion. But that's the problem. They just keep underestimating him at every single turn. For now, Shanti wants to just stay patient and let the right moment present itself, and that's when they'll make their move. Now Tommy did also make a call to JP because he wanted to see Kate. They never left their relationship on good terms at the end of season 2, but I'm sure that's something that will probably be put right in the coming episodes starting from episode 2. Janard also had other things that he had to deal with as well, and that was King Kilo. So let's move on to the situation with D-Mac. Now the last time we saw D-Mac was when he killed Mad Dog and gave the news to Diamond. He was now here asking whether Diamond smoothed things over with King Kilo, but also to put him back to work. The problem is, he's put the CBI and Tommy in a very difficult spot by killing King Kilo's nephew, because you've now got King Kilo putting pressure on Janard, telling him that if he wants to keep the peace, if they want to keep this coalition with the RDs, he has to get rid of D-Mac. The longer D-Mac stays alive, the weaker he appears to be. He told him, get it done, and you've only got 1 week. You've also then got Shanti in Janard's ear who's telling him that if King Kilo can wait a week, he can maybe wait 2 or 3, use his grief to their advantage, keep D-Mac alive as long as they can. Because when King Kilo is released a bit later on, they can make it look like Tommy and Diamond were the ones who were protecting him. Then King Kilo will take out Tommy and Diamond for them, and that's when they'll step in. But I really don't think Janard is actually on board with Shanti's vision. I personally don't think he's actually good with taking out Diamond. When it comes to crunch time, I do actually think he's going to flip on Shanti. Now with Diamond, Janard tells him that King Kilo wants D-Mac dead ASAP. The problem he has with killing D-Mac at this moment in time is it could mess up everything they built with Tommy. It's a lose-lose situation at this moment. If they kill D-Mac, then they have to deal with Tommy. However, if they don't, then their coalition with the RDs and King Kilo then falls apart. And then it puts a target on their backs as well. So taking both into account, I'm actually not surprised that Diamond then tells Janard to get rid of D-Mac, but make sure it doesn't come back on them. Because his decision probably stems from being fed up of Tommy calling the shots, speaking to him the way he does at times, just like at the beginning, and also cleaning up D-Mac's mess. This is also where Janard planted yet another seed. He told Diamond that Tommy had been dealing with Maria behind Miguel's back, something that Diamond didn't actually know back in season 2. That made Diamond confront Tommy because he's done with him keeping secrets. Diamond wanted him to stay away from Maria back in 201, and he gave him an ultimatum. Don't fuck it up again, or he'll be down a partner. Now Tommy knows he did wrong by not telling Diamond. One of the reasons why there were so many issues between Tommy and Ghost back in power was because Ghost used to keep things from Tommy. He was seeing Angela, who ended up being a federal prosecutor. He put club business over their street business, amongst a lot of other things. And that's what Tommy's been doing for majority of the time since he's been in Chicago. But they are definitely planting the seeds for what's to come pretty soon. An eventual split between Tommy, Diamond, and Tommy probably being kicked out of the CBI. So the distrust, tension, betrayal, and problems between Tommy and Diamond, they've already laid the foundations in episode 1. Now a bit later on when Tommy came to see Shanti about Claudia Flynn being alive, their conversation was interrupted because they had some rumblings in the gym. It was an ambush from the Marquez cartel, and it wouldn't be a power season opener if you didn't have Tommy cancelling someone's Christmas, but now they know they needed to keep their guard up. Another person who also needs to keep her guard up is Claudia Flynn. Elise gave her the news that the ambush failed, and that means she's also got a target on her back. There is no way Tommy lets her live for what she did to Liliana, and I can't wait for them to come face to face. The actors have actually teased there is a lot of respect between each other, but at the end of the day, Claudia still has to go. Now towards the end, Tommy did go and pay Miguel Garcia another visit. He's someone who never hides. He also let Miguel know that he may have beaten him to the punch when it came to the Albanians, but he's still here. He's still gonna take what's his. But he did also make Maria that promise that he won't kill Miguel. That's the only condition that she had when it came to Tommy, because she accepts everything else. She accepts the life that Tommy's in, and she is gonna wait for him, but only if he promises to never kill Miguel. And I do think that is one step closer to them potentially working together at some point in the future. Now, as the night was coming to a close, D-Mac was taken by Janard. Diamond did give the go-ahead to go and kill him, but we know that's not going to happen. Shanti's plan is to keep him alive for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, making Kilo believe that Tommy and Diamond were the ones who were protecting him, so I don't actually think anything will actually happen to D-Mac, at least in the short term. The same also goes for Vic Flynn. This is where Tommy and Diamond finally confronted him about being the snitch, because Tommy did see him speaking to Stacey Marks right at the end of back of season 2, and his plan, he now owns him. He's going to be Tommy's inside man in the feds, so they can always remain one step ahead. And unfortunately, Vic is now trapped. On one side he's got Stacey Marks who owns him, and on the other side he's now got Tommy and Diamond who own him. But I do have a potential way out for Vic, which I am going to leave for this upcoming week, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that particular breakdown. Now with that being said, that concludes episode 1's breakdown. So thank you guys for watching, drop all your thoughts and comments down below in the comment section for all things episode 1. And as always, I'll see you next time.